Good morning, Eden. We are on Memtes Omid Bays 49b, the home stretch, last page of the Masechta Sotah. Second line from the top, last word. So the Gemara or the Mishnah and the Gemara's commentary has been discussing the decline of the generations, beginning with the destruction of the temple and the era and events around that. The Mishnah discusses both the decline of the natural world, decline of the state of the Jewish people, and decline in practice and ritual. Right? We had music. We're going to discuss soon the crowns of the brides and the groom. So there's a decline on all levels, right? The decline of revelation and so on. Now, at this point, the Gemara fast tracks to the end. That is toward the generation that precedes Mashiach's coming. It gives a description of what that looks like. Now, the way the Gemara describes or refers to, or the generation that precedes Mashiach's coming is in these words, Be'ikvois Mashiach, which literally means on the heels of Mashiach. On the heels of Mashiach is an expression to say the generation that Mashiach is about to come. So it's on the heels, it's just about to enter. Right? That's what the word heels mean. The heels of Mashiach. It's about to enter. Generation that's about to enter into the messianic redemptive state. Now, this phrasing, Ikvois Mashiach, the heels of Mashiach is very significant. So it's not just metaphorical in the sense that, like, the footsteps and there's heels and you're about to enter. It also describes the state of the people. Right? We know that Jewish souls, the Gemara refers to it this way, and certainly in Kabbalistic thinking, that's this way. All the souls are one big, great spiritual body. One big, great spiritual body, one entity. It's just one great spiritual body. And in the same way, the body is a united entity. Firstly, the body is interconnected, but more importantly, the body, every part of the body shares the same DNA. Right? There's multi levels to the soul, to the body's oneness. There's the fact that it comes from one parent physically, the fact that it has the same DNA, the fact that they're interconnected, they need each other. And the same thing is true of the Jewish people as a whole. We're one great spiritual body. We share the same DNA. We have the same divine spark, even if we function differently, just as the body functions differently. And even as we function differently, we're interconnected, as the body is interconnected. This metaphor is in the Yerushalmi, in the Gemara, and in Chassidus. So this metaphor also describes not just each generation, but the generations as a whole. So if the early generations are the heads of this great spiritual body, as we get to Mashiach's time, we're at the heels. That's another meaning to this word, the heels of Mashiach. Not just a description of the time that's on the heels, Mashiach's about to come, but also a description of the state of the Jewish people. We are the souls that are heels. Right? Now, this fact that we are souls that are heels tells us about the function of and the job of our generation. So on one hand, it indicates we're at the lowest level, right? As opposed to the heads, the minds of the Jewish people. They were generations prior, and which is why their function was to write the Gemara, to write the Mishnah, to write the post-Talmud Rishonim, because they were the minds of the Jewish people. Right? And each generation, depending on where they are in this great body of Jewish people, that will determine the function that they have to do in the great story of our Jewish history that concludes that culminates, I shouldn't say concludes, but culminates in the coming of Mashiach. So what's the function of the heel?
Isn't the heel the most tameh part of the body?
So it's the lowest part. It's got the least cognition. Right? Cognitively speaking, it's the lowest.
Is it also the strongest part? Or the hardest part?
It's in what regard is it strongest?
Well, it's action oriented.
Action oriented. It gets things done. It goes places that the mind can't go. The mind requires the heel to take it where it wants to go. So if the mind says, okay, that's the direction we should be going, the heels goes there. So the mind of the Jewish people can sit, and as generations before, can sit and think about, envision, and describe how a Jew should be functioning in the greatest way, because they're the minds. And thus they write the Gemara, the Mishnah, the Zohar, which describe where we're going. But who gets that done? The heel. It's our generation that focuses on that. The Alter writes this in Tanya, actually. Not in relation to this phrasing, Ikvus of the Mashiach, but in another context, a similar context, that in generations prior, Talmud Sotah was the highest thing. Torah study was the highest thing. That was their function, to produce Torah. In our generation, it's charity, tzedakah, giving, getting things done. The ideas of Torah have all been laid out. Right? The action, the doing things, even without the deep cognition, that's the function of our generation. Furthermore, precisely because the heel doesn't have the deep cognition, it's why it'll take the greatest risks. If you're about to enter a pool of water, you're not sure how hot it is or how cold it is, you're not going to stick your head in to check it out. You stick your heels in. Because if it gets a little burnt, we can handle it. Right? The heel can handle it. If it gets a little too cold, the heel can handle it. Right? So it'll send a message back to the head, okay, this is a good place to go, not a good place to go. That's our generation. To forge forward, even in danger, even to the point of Mesiras Nefesh, to the point of complete self-sacrifice. Dedication, precisely because we lack that great philosophical and sophistication, precisely why we're dedicated. Like the heel doesn't ask the brain, why should I go there? Or is it the right thing to go there? The head said go, the heels go. So this is our generation. On the one hand, it's the heel, doesn't have the great depth, doesn't have the great heart. It's not as emotional, it's not as poetic, it's not as sophisticated, it's not as philosophical as generations prior. Because we're not the heart or the mind. But getting things done, that's our generation. To forge forward even when...
Is this our generation, or is this every generation since that says it's our generation?
I don't know, but it's our generation. What can I tell you? And so now I'm giving this as an introduction. Sorry?
It's always been one.
There were generations, in terms of self-sacrifice, there were generations of lots of self-sacrifice, certainly. But generations prior, their self-sacrifice, for the most part, revolves around Torah. And in our generation, it could be self-sacrifice for the sake of a fellow Jew. For the sake of a fellow Jew. For the sake of getting things done. There's that element. We don't have that sophistication. But that commitment that we have, it's keeping in theme what we're talking about till now, that as the generations decline and there's less revelation, right? The glitz and the glamour is gone, but what are we left with? Avinu Shebashamayim, our Father in heaven, we forge forward. Even if we lack the sophistication of previous generations. And this is highlighted in this terminology, the heels of Mashiach, the generation being described as a heel. It even lacks sensitivity. The heel is the least sensitive of all the parts of the body. So it lacks a certain, spiritual sense, but it marches forward.
Also, if we didn't have the heel, we'd topple over.
Exactly. It holds the entire structure.
Sure.
Right. So all the sophistication stands on whether the heel can perform its function. So all the generations prior, with all the great sophistication and all the great poetry and all the great music and song and dance and love and fear and all that, all stands on us marching forward.
And that's why.
That's our generation, soldiers, foot soldiers.
That's why birds don't have heels. So when they walk, their head goes forward.
It's true. Because they're flying. They fly. That's their primary mode of moving around.
Yeah. But when they're walking, you see a picture walking, it's always like this.
Yep.
You do that very well.
Yeah. Okay, so with that in mind, let's read now the Gemara's prediction for what the generation prior to Mashiach's coming looks like. The first two words are, I don't know what the word for it is. They're just great. So the first words are like this. The Ikvos Mashiach, yes, on the heels of Mashiach. First description. Chutzpah Yazga. You have to translate the word chutzpah. Audacity dominates. That's our generation. Arrogance. Chutzpah.
Yeah.
Audacity. And it's connected to this heel business.
Ego.
Yeah. It could be used in the most destructive way.
Pride, entitlement.
Pride, entitlement. And you're going to see it's going to get even more, it's going to get even better. And it could be used in the positive or the negative. It's either me, or it's I'm a soldier. Someone's going to stop me. I'm a soldier. Like the heel. It's either looked at as the lowest part of the body, or it's looked at as that which gets things done. And it's this audacity, it's chutzpah, that makes our generation both the most potent and the most dangerous. Both. Likewise, the Yoker Ya'amir. Yoker Ya'amir again is, remember the translation? Where's that Rashi? Sorry, oh man, I forgot the translation. Yoker Ya'amir is people, I think it means people pursue money. I can't get the exact translation. Hold on a second, I'm sorry. I looked this up again this morning, but my memory's not as good as I hope it is. Where is it? Yeah. High cost will pile up. Yeah. Yoker Ya'amir. High cost will pile up. I guess people are pursuing pleasure. Cost of things increase. Things get more and more expensive. Things become more and more expensive. Hagif and tirtin period. Wine shall bear lots of fruit. The vine will the grape will produce lots of fruit, meaning it'll produce a lot of wine. But the wine's going to be expensive because people are going to be so busy trying to consume. So even though there's abundance, it's still expensive. Yeah, people are sounds familiar. Okay. Malchus tehapech leminus. Monarchy, sovereignty, will turn to heresy. Until the last few hundred years, with the popularization of the American model of governance, your citizenship was tied to your faith. Every monarch had their religion, and if you want to be a full citizen, you had to abide by that religion. If not, you were a resident alien at best. Right? Jews could have lived in France for 100 years and 10 generations, and they were still foreign residents. They were not considered full French citizens because they're Jewish. In Russia, until, I don't know, maybe 50, 60 years ago, even less, no less, till the fall of communism. If you were Jewish, your passport said Hebrew. As a Canadian, your passport says Canadian. It doesn't matter what your religion is, right? But till recently, that wasn't the case. Everywhere in the world. Till today, there's places in the world where your religion is tied to your political standing, your citizenship is tied to your religion. Right? So there's an inherent relationship between religion and state. But here the Gemara says that when Mashiach comes, Malchus tapach limnos, sovereignty, monarchy will turn to heresy. The government has no say in your morality. It doesn't care for your morality. Sound familiar? Likewise, the ain't techachos, and there's no one to reproach, no one to admonish the people for misbehaving. As Rashi puts it, where is that Rashi? The reason why no one can tell anybody else off is because everybody's misbehaving. And if someone comes along and says, hey, you're misbehaving, then the people listening say, well, so are you. Right? There's no one that has the moral high ground. This is how the Gemara describes.
Woman's not judged if her husband is.
That's right, yeah. Her husband herself is. Yep. So that's right. There's a hypocrisy. So someone comes along and says, no, we have to increase morality. And before you know it, a scandal comes out about him too. That's how the Gemara is putting it here. Beis Vad, houses of getting together for Torah study, Yiyeliznus, become homes of promiscuity. So it actually explains it for us. The way the study halls used to be outside of town. And the reason is because they didn't want distraction. So they would leave like the hustle bustle of the city. They would go to these study halls that were out in the outskirts and spend their days and nights absorbed in Torah study. So says the Gemara that those kinds of locations will become places of promiscuity. So instead of
outside,
that's right. Instead of getting out of town, because you want to get away from distractions so you can absorb yourself in Torah, people get out of town so they can hide their sins. Okay, Vahagalil Yechrav, the Galil will be desolate, will be destroyed. Vagavlon, I'm not sure what the Gavlon is, but it seems like it's some location. Yishoim will be desolate. The Anshe Agvul, men of the border, which means people who travel from town to town collecting money. Earlier will go from town to town. The lo yechananu will find no one to have compassion on them. And the wisdom of the wise or of the scholars, tisrach, will become putrid. The yireh chet yamasu, and those who fear sin will be disgusted. I hope this sounds familiar to everybody here. Va'emes tehei nederes. Truth will be, nederes means like lost, not lost, but like difficult to find. Truth will be difficult to find. Right? What's the truth? Right? All kinds of borders and boundaries of what we accepted as normal, and everybody just knew that this was it. It's all gone. The borders between gender, the borders between sexuality, the borders between philosophy, the borders between countries, everything is, nobody has any firm lines anymore. And someone comes along and says, no, I fear to misbehave in a certain way. What do you mean? Self-expression. Right? And there's no one to come and tell anybody else off. Who are you to tell me off? Right? Truth is out the window.
Everybody's politically correct.
There's no truth. There's all moral relativism. There's no morality, no morality in government. No one tell anybody else off. Everybody's chutzpah yaska. Everybody's got their own opinion, and my opinion must be right. The next line: Na'arim pnei zikenim yalbinu. The youth will embarrass the elders. Will make white the face of the elders. You think you know what you're talking about? Zikenim yamdu pnei ktanim. Elders will have to stand up for the younger, for the youth, for kids. The elders will be forced to respect the kids, not the reverse. Ben menavel of, a son will desecrate his father. Bas kama be'ima, a daughter will stand up to her mother. Kala b'chamasa, and a daughter-in-law to her mother-in-law. Oive ish, the enemies of man, anche beiser, will be the members of his own household. Pnei hador k'pnei hakelev, right? The enemies from within, not from the out. The enemies from within. Pnei hador k'pnei hakelev, the face of the generation will be the face of a dog. There's different interpretations to what this means, the face of the dog. It could be the brazenness described earlier, but I heard one interpretation, which is, I think, great. The face of the generation is like the face of a dog, is when you see a man walking a dog, on the face of it, it looks like the dog is leading because the dog is in front. But the dog is constantly looking back to see where the owner is going, to where it should lead. So the leadership doesn't have any actual leadership. They're constantly looking at the people and saying, which way do you want to go? Okay, I'll go this way. No real leadership. It's a dog's version of leadership.
Maybe that the dog just goes with its instinct. For the dog has no free will, or sees a piece of meat,
it runs to get it.
He doesn't think.
Yeah, that's probably the most basic way. That's probably the most basic way of skipping it. Haben ein mispayish ma'aviv. A son is not embarrassed in the presence of his father. Classically, or like Manas Friedman has a book called, I didn't read the book, but the title is great, which is Why Doesn't Anybody Blush Anymore? So it's one of his first books he wrote. Why doesn't anybody blush anymore? That's the point. It's like, there's one thing that a person misbehaves because, we got human instincts, we got human urges, and we slip up. But don't run around patting yourself on the back and claiming self-expression. Be a little embarrassed. You have to go tell everybody and toot your horn for your sin. A little embarrassment is okay. He says, no, I've been in misbehaved. So my father knows I misbehaved. So what? What do I care? He's a boomer. What do I care? Right? That's the language nowadays.
No shame.
No shame. And on what do we have to rely? And our Father in heaven. It's uncanny the way this is a description of our generation. Right? And not just culture, from all levels. And I don't have to elaborate, but just in one regard, talking about truth being
Inverted.
Sorry?
Inverted.
It can't be found. Right? This idea that truth can't be found, not just because nobody knows the truth. It's because truth itself became something that's malleable. Right? On a real philosophical level, like the postmodern thinking is that there is no absolute truth, philosophically speaking. Like, for example, if you read, this is an actual philosophical way of thinking. If you read an ancient historical text, so the thinking used to be, there's probably some truth in it, and we have to discover what's true and what's not true about it. The historical text, what are the biases of the writer, things of that nature. And the modern thinking is, the only thing we know about this book is that this person wrote the book. Nothing else about it to be assumed as anything truth, right? And it has wide-ranging ramifications, because it presumes that the truth you have presently in front of you now is the truth, and whatever brought you to this point, maybe yes, maybe no, we don't know because I wasn't there, right? So truth itself becomes a matter of subjectivity, because all I know is that I'm looking at this thing. That's it. So if I feel a certain way, who's to tell me that that's not true? Why should generation? No, right, philosophically speaking, who should tell me it's not true? There's no one to tell me off, because you have your truth, I have my truth. If inherently, it's not just we can't find the truth, but truth itself is a matter of concealment. What I'm saying is that the Gemara's description of
not absolute.
Exactly. It's not just when the Gemara says that truth is hard to find. It's not just because nobody knows it, because truth inherently became something that is subject to the observer. So you cannot inherently ever find an absolute truth. You can only say what you feel now. And tomorrow, if you feel differently, well, that's my truth. So how could you have anybody tell anybody else off? And why wouldn't it be chutzpah? Why wouldn't it be audacity? Why shouldn't it be? Like, if philosophically speaking, there's no objective standard by which we measure truth, then why should I feel embarrassed by anything? Why should I be told off by anybody? There's no. Why shouldn't I go have a good time?
No yards.
There's no. That's right. There's no measuring stick by which to measure. That's right.
No borders.
No border. That's right. It's all relative. It's all relative to the experience. My experience. My experience truth. My truth, experience truth, and so on.
That's one of the biggest problems of the non-believers. Who wrote the book?
Right.
Who wrote the Bible? That's what they all say.
It's all questions. That's right.
I know it's something that you write.
But this is both a plus and a minus. There's a video that Gem produced recently. Gem is that organization that produces videos of the Rabbi, and they have interviews about people with their relationship with the Rabbi. And there's a shliach, one of the first shluchim to, I think, somewhere in the Midwest, where he says how the Rebbe told him before he went on his mission, like giving him insight into how he can inspire his people. And the Rebbe says something like this. I urge you to go look for the video, because you get the exact line is good. The Rebbe said, you cannot tell an American to do anything, but you can inspire him to do everything. As if this same chutzpah, this same self-assuredness is channeled, and I'm a Jew and this is who I am, there's nothing stopping him. Because who are you to tell me that I can't be a good Jew? That same chutzpah could be used in the other way, right? The Gemoro says that a person is obligated to say the world was created for me. That's what the Gemoro says, right? Lama nivri adam yechidi. Why was man created alone? All of the animals were created in multitudes, many cows at once. Human is only at one, right? Why? Because the world is created for each person, and a person's obligated to say the world is created for me. Well, that can be completely corrupted. The world's created just for me. I take whatever I want. Or the world's created just for me because the entire world's waiting for me to make my contribution. It's both a plus and a minus, depending on how it's directed. Like the heel, it's the lowest part of the body, but the one that's most brazen, to get brazen in the negative or in the positive, right? Likewise, this is an educational revolution, actually, which I don't know to what degree this thinking became successful outside of Chabad, but the world would be very well to learn from this. In the 80s, there began an organization called Tzivos Hashem, which means the Army of God. And it's a children's club that still goes on till today. And it's a system by which the kids have like missions, and their missions are to say Madani in the morning, to make a bracha, to daven, to listen to their parents, love their fellow Jew, whatever, all the missions of a Jew, and they tick off their missions. Originally it was mail-in, today it's online. And as they fulfill their missions, they climb in rank. You start out as a private, and then you become a major, and this and that, in general, right? It's this whole system. So when Rebbe began this project, Army of God, he got a letter, I don't know from who, but it seems like he got some sort of complaint that it's violent. Why do you have to use the idea of army? Army is violent. Give it more domesticated for a sort of form of club. Why army? And Deborah wrote back. You can, again, you probably Google it and find out his letter, because it's an English letter. It's not a translation. It's originally written in English. And the gist of what the Rebbe says there is like this. I'm looking at a generation here that takes no pride in their discipline. Right? No pride in their discipline. Now, to come and tell an American kid, you're nothing, follow orders, it's not going to work. It cannot work. It does not work. Everybody doesn't say this, but how many of us heard, I'm much younger, but how many of us are growing up, make something of yourself. Make something of yourself, right? That expression presumes that you're worthless. Unless you do something, you're worthless. That's the presumption. Make something of yourself, because right now you're nothing. So go make something of yourself. And kids today just don't buy it. I'm everything. What do you mean I'm nothing? So Deborah is writing, I'm trying to find a way to make kids proud of discipline. And that's the soldier. The soldier isn't told you're nothing. The soldier is told the entire army is dependent on you. You better fulfill your mission because everything relies on you. On your discipline, on your regiment, and the more discipline you have, and the more you accept the yoke of the commander, the more you climb in rank, ironically. You climb in rank, your ego, so to speak, is boosted by accepting the yoke of your commander. So it takes that confidence and now gives it direction. It's a brilliant model. It's a brilliant model. And it explains why the Lubavitcher kids at 10, 11 years old are okay knocking on doors and saying, hey, do you want a shekel of an esrog? Kid's 10. Because what do you mean? If I don't knock on his door to shekel of an esrog, no one is. I have to. Knock, knock. It's a soldier model. It's the heel model. You got to march forward. So you don't have the sophistication. It's not beautiful and it's not poetic, but it gets the job done. It's march forward. It takes all that chutzpah and all that self-assuredness and redirects it, instead of it being consumption, but turns it into production. You can't tell the American Jew to do anything, but you can inspire him to do everything. If the American Jew believes that this is what it's supposed to be, then he's going all the way to the end. All that chutzpah that tells him to march in the street for whatever becomes the march in the street for Jewish life. Right, which is another revolution in this same vein from the Rebbe. The Lag B'Omer parades. In the 40s and 50s, it was unheard of to make a Jewish parade. After coming from Europe and coming from the war, the thinking was a Jew in the home, American on the street. Oh, that was the thinking. That was the expression. A Jew in the home, a Yid in the heim, an American auf the gas. A Jew at home and an American on the street. Because you have to announce your Judaism to the whole world. Pipe down a little bit. And everybody understood it's not going to work for this generation. And it's not going to buy it. So they began the Lag B'Omer parade. What do you mean? If all these people are marching on the streets in America because they're for Labor Day, for this parade, for that parade, what, so Jews are going to be at home and march on the streets for what? No, we're going to march on the street. They were proud Jews. That's the Lag B'Omer parade.
Was that when they minted the coins?
So they minted the coins. That's right. You march on the street as a proud Jew. And since then, it's caught on, thank God. And now it's become very normalized to march on the street. Right. I also heard another one, a line from there, but like this, that in Europe, in the old aristocracy, you have to prove your point. In America, you just have to say it confidently. You have to prove your point to anything. You just have to say it confidently. That's the heel. It's the chutzpah yaska in the positive sense. You don't have to explain to anybody why Yiddishkeit, what. You just got to say it with a confidence, with a faith in yourself, with a faith that Hashem has in you. right? Rabbi Munasacha, we say every morning, great is your faith. We say, after we thank Hashem for waking up in the morning, we say, great is your faith in me. And when you proudly display your Yiddish with that kind of confidence, then all the negativity described here can be rechanneled in a good direction. It's the heels of Mashiach, the generation that's capable of marching forward without care for whether they're embarrassed by their elders, right? In the positive sense, that they're embarrassed in the elders. And I'll conclude with this with the following in regard to this specifically about being embarrassed from your elders. When my father's parents got married, my grandparents getting married in Australia, the Rebbe wrote a lengthy letter to my great-grandfather, to the bride's father. And the Rebbe begins by saying, I was debating back and forth for a long time whether I should send you this letter, but I decided it's important, so I'm sending it to you. And essentially, the letter is, he's asking of my great-grandfather that his daughter, the bride, should wear a head covering after she gets married, a sheitel. She should wear a wig after she gets married. Why was the Rebbe going back and forth? Because my grandparents were one of the first post-war Orthodox weddings in Melbourne, Australia, specifically of a Hasidic family. And my grandfather did well in his business, and he was a good-looking young man, and she was a good-looking young girl. So it was like this. It was like they were referred to as a Shabbos Bereshis, like the first Shabbos of the year. This is like the Shabbos Bereshis of Australia. This is going to set the tone for the way Australia goes. The trendsetters. What's religious couples going to look like in Australia, right? And therefore, he's asking my great-grandfather to please encourage your daughter to wear a sheitel, which she readily agreed. And it, Asiya knew wore a sheitel, this good-looking young girl marrying this Australian-born Max knew if she can wear a sheitel, it was like, okay, so we can do it also. That was kind of his idea, and it worked. Now, in that letter that writes to my great-grandfather, it says, ask for the fact that your wife might not be wearing a sheitel. And that's the way it was in the old European country, especially in the Russian areas, where the husbands were sometimes more religious than their wives, and the wife didn't wear a sheitel. It wasn't so out of the question. Mind you, these are the same women that were breaking the ice to go to the mikvah with self-sacrifice. But covering their hair wasn't necessarily high on the list priority-wise. So the Rebbe writes to my great-grandfather, okay, so as for the fact that your wife isn't wearing a sheitel and your daughter is going to, says, don't worry. In America, it's already become normal that children are more religious than their parents. It's fine. It's not the worst thing in the world. And that's kind of the same, the Gemara's point here. The generation that the children are not going to be embarrassed by their parents. Good. So you can be a Baal Tshuva, and the parents are going to mock the kid for being a Baal Tshuva, and the kid's going to proudly say, I'm an American, I have rights, I do what I want, and I decide to be religious. You're mocking me? Too bad. The same attitude, but this time in the positive. And this really is, it's an incredible prophecy, can I say? The heels of Mashiach.
It's also the
generation of chutzpah.
The
generation of chutzpah.
Teach the parents.
And the kids teach them. That's correct.
Because you learn it.
God will return the hearts of the fathers on their
stories now where kids are teaching their father
100%.
Put on tefillin in 30 years.
100%. It's the verse that the fathers will turn on the heart from the hearts of their children.
So I guess that this is all the negative, and then
it's both.
That's like
that's right. We have nothing left but Hashem himself.
Torah that we have today here.
Okay, have a wonderful day. And tomorrow we're going to get back to the discussion of the different things that the sages enacted as the destruction was taking place, right? They said no more crowns for the brides, for the grooms, no more drums, no more teaching your children Greek. We'll discuss that over the next few paragraphs. And then the conclusion of Gemara is going to be the discussion about the different people who died. And as they died, certain qualities ended. That's going to be the final discussion. Okay, have a wonderful day.
Tomorrow I might not be here because we're doing the minion for the